Now we are going to talk about anxiety disorders. Now this is going to be our first set of specific categories, specific diagnostic labels that might show up in someone's medical chart or school records or other type of records in certain instances. Now, one thing we do have to keep in mind is that professionals in the United States use a system. We all have an official system for labeling psychological or psychiatric disorders, and we have a manual called the DSM. If you hear the DSM, that stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It is published by the American Psychiatric Association. Psychiatry and psychology are not the exact same thing, but we often have to work together. And so even if you are not a psychiatrist, if you are a psychologist, counselor, social worker, somebody working in a school, if you are talking about mental disorders, you use the labels that come from the DSM that's published by the American Psychiatric Association. It is currently in its 5th edition, so we have the DSM-5. And they used to use Roman numerals. I'm checking real quick. They used to use Roman numerals, and now we're actually using the numeral 5, DSM, the number 5. I always want to put it as the Roman numeral because we did it like that for a long time. Because I'm not a clinical psychologist, I have to do more adjusting. So, in this system, in this manual, this book, this Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, it has different categories, and it basically has symptom checklists where you go through and basically you have to determine if you're a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist or someone who can diagnose people. You'd say, does the person exhibit these particular symptoms? It is a descriptive system. It doesn't tell you why they have those symptoms. That is an important thing that sometimes people miss that fact. Like if you tell somebody, hey, your child has ADHD. And sometimes people will say, oh, well, now we know why they act that way. Actually, no, we have no idea why they act that way. All we are telling you is, yes, indeed, they do act that way. The way they are acting fits under the category, the label, the diagnosis of ADHD. So it's important to remember that. When we give someone a diagnosis, we don't say why they have that disorder, just they have that disorder. Okay, so anxiety disorders. These are pretty prevalent, and there's a lot that fall under the general category of an anxiety disorder. It's a group of psychological disorders characterized by prolonged, has to last a long time, uncontrollable, all right, so you can't just tell them to stop doing that, uncontrollable, and sometimes vague, uncertain feelings of worry or anxiety. Now, you might have noticed, the textbook used the word anxiety in the definition of something that has the word anxiety in its title. That's always a little circular and problematic. If you were experiencing anxiety, how are you feeling? Nervous, worried, tense, fearful. These are the sorts of things that you might see with anxiety. Where I live in the South, I live in southern Louisiana. I know a lot of folks around here, especially older folks, a lot of times they won't use the word anxiety, but they'll say, I got nerves, my nerves are bad. So there are different words that might be that might be used for this sort of experience. But you think anxious, think nervous, nervous, nervous. I used to have a professor just say always 3 times, nervous, nervous, nervous. All right, so I'm nervous, I'm worried, I'm on edge, I feel like something bad's gonna happen. Those are the sort of things you might see with anxiety. All right, now, within anxiety, one category that we have are phobias. And sometimes students will get excited, like, hey, I've heard of phobias. I've seen internet lists where they have these long lists of all these weird and quirky phobias, like people who have fear of clowns and fear of the number 13 and fear of getting peanut butter stuck to the roof of your mouth. Yes, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of specific phobias identified, and they all fall under the category of specific phobia. Now, very importantly, to be diagnosed with specific phobia, you can't just have a fear of a particular thing. It has to be clinically significant. Remember that term? It has to cause problems for you. So this is persistent, irrational fear of a specific object or situation. All right, so this can include something like really strong fear of spiders or snakes. Now, some of you might be thinking, I fear spiders and snakes. Does that mean I have a specific phobia? It depends. How strong, how irrational. For example, if someone will not go into their backyard ever because there is a chance there might someday be a snake back there, that's interfering with their life in some way. That's more along the lines of a phobia, clinically significant. If someone is so fearful of flying that they don't fly to meet their new grandchild or something like that, something where they really like to do it but they're being held back by their fear of flying, that's more in line with a phobia. All right, so think severe. Severe causes problems, and irrational. Some fears make sense. If a big snake is coming towards you and it looks harmful and it could hurt you, it makes absolute sense to have fear in that situation. This is irrational fear, where you're not in actual danger. Fear in a situation where it's not a natural reaction to danger. Now,
like the fear of kiwis.
All right, my child just chimed in because it's a work from home day. It's election day today. By the way, I got my little sticker. I voted. I hope you did too. My child just shouted out, like a fear of kiwis. Yes, if you have an irrational fear of kiwis that keeps you from trying a delicious fruit, you might have a specific phobia.
Listen, they shouldn't have fur.
My child just said they shouldn't have fur. And hopefully my child won't mind if I share. My child is diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. So it kind of fits that they're in that category. All right, so that is specific phobia. There are other anxiety disorders, and if I tried to cram them all into one video, we'd be here for a while. So the next video, we are going to start with social anxiety disorder.